Hey YouTube, so this is a follow-up to my previous video. There's a few things I want to expand further on, and there's a few points which aren't related to that video particularly, but really need to be brought up, and maybe I'm going to get some flack for this, maybe some people are going to have to call me an arsehole, but it's shit which I think really needs to be said, which I don't see many other people speaking about in the Hema community. So please, bear in mind that all of this is coming from an absolute love of Hema, despite some of the negative things I have to say, and it's out of a want to see Hema do better. So, first thing I'd want to expand on is the idea that the way we spar in Hema isn't perfect. Yeah, shocking, right? But no, this isn't even a criticism of the way we do things in Hema. It's not even necessarily saying we should be doing anything different. It's simply saying that there is no such thing as a perfect way of sparring which replicates how you would fight with a sharp weapon like this, unarmoured. There simply isn't. There's always going to be some compromises you make, whether it be in the amount of protective gear you wear and lack of mobility and slight reduction in speed, whether it be the weapons being blunt and not binding in the same way or behaving slightly differently in the hand, or the rule set you're using, or some combination of all three. There is going to be some level of compromise you make somewhere. And until we can jack ourselves into the Matrix and get around that whole problem of if you die in the Matrix, you die in real life thing, you know, we fix that little bug and we've got the Matrix in 50 years, then maybe we can have a perfect simulation. Until then, we simply can't. It's as simple as that. When it comes to Hema, the way we generally spar is, we'll try and land the hit and not get hit back. Maybe we'll fly back into guard and get back out into distance or whatever. But the general, the general way it's done is simply you score a point by hitting the other person without them hitting you back. No, that isn't to say there aren't going to be some Hema clubs somewhere which do things a little bit differently. Perhaps there are, and if your club does, by all means, leave a comment down below. I'd love to see the different perspectives. But if there is, I'm not talking about your clubs. I'm just talking about a generality there. It is point sparring, effectively, and there are pros and cons to that. On the plus side, it's teaching you to hit without being hit, which is absolutely fantastic. Really important skill to learn. And if I was to actually train for a real sword fight, whether it be to the death or just simply to first blood, the way we tend to do it in Hema would be the way I chose to train if I had to train exclusively in one method. But, like I said, it's not perfect. We're doing point sparring, and unfortunately, that does teach some bad habits. You're not going to be fighting perfectly, that's just the reality of things. You are occasionally going to get hit, and Hema doesn't teach you what to do once you've actually been hit. You've been hit, and in Hema, so okay, well, a point's been scored against you, get back into distance, alright, start again, whatever. It simply doesn't teach you any level of follow-through. And on the other side of that, of course, once you've actually landed a hit, you score a point, and you score a point there. You get back into distance without being hit back, so you don't get hit by the afterblow. You're not learning how to follow through from there, so you're not, for example, cutting in, closing in, while trying to make sure that they can't hit you back, tackling them to the floor, jucking them between the eyes or whatever. You're not learning any follow through. And yeah, this has problems as well. Learning not to get hit, I think, is far more important, but learning what to do once you have been hit is also very important. If you just freeze there on the spot You know, which is what effectively you're training to do with Hema. The vast majority of the time, you stop immediately, and maybe you try and deliver an after blue, but that's it. You know, after a second, you've stopped, and that is a bad habit in and of itself. So like I said in the previous video, that is one thing which M1 and Battle of the Nations, despite their many flaws, that's one thing which they do very well, and it's a skill which I think would be beneficial for a Hema practitioner to also learn. Maybe even, you know, cross-training, even if you cross-trained in boxing, perhaps you'd learn to keep fighting, you'd actually learn that whole skill set, rather than just sort of freezing up after it. Next group I'd like to talk about is the Holmganghamburg guys, which I'll link down in the description box. These guys are fucking nutcases. They spar with sharp steel, sometimes they're even shirtless. I would guess they do have protection to their neck and their head. And I would guess that their weapons aren't fully sharpened and that they're sharp enough to simply bind, but not sharp enough to do absolutely horrendous damage. Maybe the swords are specially designed to be light so that they don't do too much damage, but regardless, you know, they do get some pretty deep cuts into their muscles from time to time, and it is still a very dangerous activity. That could certainly get you used to fighting with sharp steel and not freaking out as much. It's certainly very useful to learn to do techniques with swords which actually bind properly. So yeah, there are some positives there. The negatives, however, apart from, you know, potentially bloody dying, if you're not injured too badly, you could only probably train spar like that every 3 months, every 6 months or so. You know, maybe you could spar every month if you're lucky enough to be in your early 20s and you heal ridiculously quickly, but the amount of sparring you can do like that is very limited. The amount of sparring you can do in Hema, however, is not. When you've got a decent amount of safety equipment and you've got these blunt swords, you can spend hours and hours every single week sparring and still be able to recover from it. So yeah, again, pros and cons. There could be something to learn from those guys, and I would like to train with them at least once in my lifetime. And finally, LARP. I don't have a lot of good things to say about LARP for the most part, but there are a few positives. In Hema, 99% of the time, you're going to be training on a hard, smooth, flat surface which is dry. You're going to be fighting with the same weapon as your opponent, and it's going to be one-on-one. And that is, of course, slightly limiting. LARP, however, every single week they do it. They're on rough terrain, you know, maybe rocks, maybe mud, maybe it's slippery, maybe it's light, maybe it's dark. And they're working with groups. They'll be learning some level of group tactics. They'll be fighting against multiple opponents. They'll be fighting with one weapon against a completely different weapon. And I'm not saying LARP's a good way to learn to actually fight. All I'm saying is that there's certain things which they learn which most people in Hema don't. Now, I do like to fight against multiple opponents. That's one of the most fun things I like to do. But I really don't do it very often. Maybe 1% of the time I spar is against multiple opponents, if that. And I do try and like to train outside from time to time. But still, the vast majority of my training does take place in the way I described previously for Hema. So, yeah, there's quite often things you can learn from other styles, even if you think what they're doing is fucking insane, even if you think it's really stupid. There are certain things which you can learn from them. Yeah, I think that's just something which people should take on board. Don't treat Hema like it's absolute perfection. Think about what other people are doing from time to time and maybe try to learn something from them. And Now, moving on, that's all I've got to say about expanding on the point from the previous video, but I'd also like to talk about some of the people I find a bit of a problem in Hema, that is the elitists, the idiots and the whingers. I'm sorry if this offends the people, but this needs to be fucking called out. First, the elitists. Now, in Metatron's latest video, and I'm not this isn't a criticism of Metatron, this is a criticism of some of his fans. I've seen people in that comment section talk about how anyone in Hema could beat anyone in M1. Are you fucking insane? That is the elitist mentality I'm talking about. I've seen the same thing in traditional martial arts, and I really don't want to see Hema go the same way. Do I even have to point out how fucking stupid that is? Yes, a lot of what people do in M1 and Battle of the Nations is very, very silly from a historical purpose. But if they're doing something, just because they're fighting in that way doesn't mean they don't know how to fight properly as well. It's like saying, he's a top level chess player, he obviously can't play Monopoly. No, it doesn't follow. So they could be very, very good at doing both. Many of them are. Many of them do have a background in Hema. But regardless, in M1 we are talking about professional fighters who spend hours and hours training every week, who've probably been doing martial arts for a decade, maybe more, versus, you know, what's the average, you know, those are the elites. The average Hema practitioner, I don't know, like 150 pounds, 25% body fat, trains once a week and maybe does half an hour of other sports per week, doesn't take particularly good care of their nutrition, has been doing Hema for about 6 months. I'm sorry, thinking that guy is going to beat the elite fighters in M1 is just absolutely insane. Like I said, you know, that's like, you know, the Wing Chun practitioners thinking, oh, well, you know, what I do is so far superior to what the people in MMA do, like, I could beat up Brock Lesnar. Absolute fucking horseshit, such elitist mentality. This shit needs to be stamped out. Next up, the idiots. The existence of the idiots could actually be a sign of a good thing. I'd say noobs really more than idiots. The fact there's so many noobs I'm seeing these days could be a very good thing. It could show that Hema is very, very rapidly growing at the moment. But I am just seeing way too many idiotic comments from the Hema perspective recently. From MatPat's video, which has rightfully been torn apart by many, many people. Unfortunately, I am seeing a lot of people in the comment section who, in their attempt to debunk MatPat, spread just as much misinformation themselves. They seem like the sort of people who've maybe watched 5 or 6 videos from Scalagrim and consider themselves a fucking expert now and able to bloody refute what MatPat has to say. No. What I said to MatPat applies to people who do Hema too. This isn't a subject you can become remotely informed on in the space of a few weeks. So yeah, this does apply to people on my side as well. I want to make sure that other people who are interested in Hema don't want to be spreading information either. But it could be a symptom of a good thing. It could simply be a symptom of hell. Hema is growing very, very rapidly at the moment, and I'm just seeing a very large abundance of noobs. So, in a way, maybe I can't complain about that. And finally, the whingers. These people make Hema practitioners look as bad as the Katana cultists. So yeah, these people need to be called out. One particular video I saw, I'll link it in the comment section if I can find it. but it's a guy who he likes to put together these martial arts in films, in film compilations, and he'll have like top 10 kickboxing or top 10 jiu-jitsu or something like that in films. And this one he did was top 10 East versus West. Now, unfortunately, all 10 of them had the East winning. And so many Hema practitioners in the comment section were butthurt about that. They're saying that, you know, this guy's clearly a bloody Asian supremacist. You know, the guy was Asian himself. People calling him fucking racist and shit. And couldn't be further from the truth. This guy, even at the beginning of the video, even said that it wasn't to show one culture being superior to the other. That's simply what he could find, and I am very, very inclined to believe him in this case. It's not the bias of him; it's simply the bias of Hollywood. You know, off the top of my head, I can't even think of any films which show the West beating the East. So yeah, it's not a bias in him; it's a bias in Hollywood. He'd even mentioned that multiple times, he made it abundantly clear, and still I saw way too many Hema practitioners just whinging about it and having a bloody cry. And yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. It makes us look as bad as the katana cultists. So again, you know, sorry if I've offended anyone here, but you know, this really does come from a love of Hema, and wanting to see Hema do better. So thanks for watching, comment, rate, subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.